Well, that is quite a title for a video now, isn't it? I do believe it is worth elaboration, so let's go through that right now. What is an emergency immediate consequence action? Well, the emergency part in this case I'm going to define as something I can activate immediately without much, if not ideally any, previous setup. For example, in EU4, exploiting development. I press a button, tax dev, dip dev, or manpower dev goes down, and money, manpower, or sailors go up. The immediate consequence part refers to the action having an instant payout, like the exploit development example we gave previously, but to give an example from EU5 of a non-immediate consequence action, starting to research technology. I would need to finish that research for the bonus whatever it may be to take effect, making the decision not an immediate consequence one. Now, to give another example, let's say I have the goal of getting more population. I could activate a buff for bonus pop growth speed and see the difference in population over 100 years, or I could encourage migration from abroad, which will lead to a faster increase in population, but still not an instant one. Or if I had won a war I hadn't pieced out of, I could piece out for enemy land and hence population, gaining that population immediately. Right, that was quite a bit to follow, dare I say. I hope I haven't been too confusing. My pitch, though, as it were, is that what I've found so far while playing EU5 is at the moment there's a lack of, for a better term, emergency immediate consequence actions, and I do apologize for phrasing it that way. Look, it's not a pretty way of phrasing it, I know, but if you have a better way of phrasing it, do let me know. And well, let's get into the game where I'm going to elaborate more on what I mean, and more on why I think this is a bad thing. Right, so here we are. I've loaded in as Portugal, and I'm going to propose a not too unusual hypothetical, dare I say, in the current state of the game. We are playing as Portugal, we are playing our nation, we've built some buildings, we are doing our thing, getting ready for colonization, and then Castile declares war on us. We did not expect Castile to declare war on us, but they've declared war on us, and furthermore, because we're already at war, we cannot seek any defensive alliance to help us with that war reactively. That is to say, we could have allied Aragon previously, or we could have tried to seek an alliance with Morocco or France or whatever, but they've declared war on us now. That option is out. And my question becomes, what can we do? Because if we were to take the numbers that are available to the game right now, Castile has 55,000 levies. We have, if we take a look at our military tab, just under 20,000 levies. How can we, as an immediate reaction to the declaration of war by Castile, increase our chances of winning? Because there's a lot of things we can do from a tactics micro point of view, defending forts, fighting smaller Castilian stacks because they're probably going to be sending all 55k at the same time. Things like that that we can do to squeeze out an advantage on a tactical level, but on a national level, what emergency stopgap measure, what button can we press to increase the quality of our troops? Because to be clear, there are actually some things. Now, we do start with the commoners' militias already granted, but that would be an option to grant that. We could go to the nobility and implement primacy of the nobility as a reaction to gain 5% discipline. And technically, we can go ahead and hire some mercenaries for this difficult war. Otherwise, honestly, really not much. Now, this was later into the game, where we had developed a more permanent standing army, we had built up our armories, we'd have more manpower to work with, we could overreact to that by building a lot more regulars and fighting. But early on, even that is not an option, and Portugal is one of the few countries, well, it's one of the major countries, hence it actually starts with a sergeantry, so it actually has some starting manpower. Most countries are not this lucky. So, like, yeah, we can micro around with these troops, but even if we decide to use this 450 manpower pool, the army maintenance is going to eat it up, right? So, it's not truly an option. And if anything, this manpower recovery is so pathetic as a rate, these guys are going to disappear after a couple battles. To compare this to EU4, well, you didn't have levies, you had force limit. And if we were to translate this directly to EU4 equivalents, we had 20k troops and Castile had 55k troops. What we could do is take a bunch of debt, use a bunch of our existent manpower they had from 1444, and go, say, 10k over force limit. We could hire like 10k mercs as well, and actually match the Castilians 40k versus 55k. We'll still be behind, we're still going to be struggling on manpower. It would not be a war necessarily to our advantage, but there was more things we could do directly in terms of going over force limit and hiring mercenaries, or even getting a discipline advisor as an equivalent to that previous 5% discipline policy, right? There were things we could do, significantly more of them, dare I say. And as we start running out of money, not only can we take loans, which is something we can do in EU5, we can take loans, but we could also debase currency. We could also exploit development. There were more micro things to squeeze out more from your nation. EU5 significantly less so. Now, part of this is intentional game design. For example, Parliament has a thing for 20% levy size. This would be a great thing to call if we could time our Parliament. But unless Castile is very nice to declare war on us, on the same month that we have our parliament, this is not something we can use reactively, and hence this does not meet the criteria for an emergency reaction. Usually you are calling parliament one every 60 months because delaying calling parliament pisses off your estate, so you don't want to do it. And also calling parliament is in general just a good thing. You're able to get bonuses from calling parliament, like changing your laws, increasing your taxes, getting war goals, all these other good things, right? So parliament is something you want to be, for lack of a better word, spamming. But this means that you can't really react to being declared war on by Castile by calling parliament and asking for 20% levy size. If you wanted to implement this as a reactive measure, one suggestion could be a military tab emergency mobilization or something of that sort, which will give you the 20% levy size from parliament. Let's say they're at the cost of annoying your estates or giving you minus 50 base support in your next parliament. So you basically give a blank check to parliament saying, look, guys, give me that mobilization now, and next parliament I'll give you support instead, right? Or even if you want to make it more punishing, say that the first 4 requests or first 3 requests, whoever is in your parliament, right? Because obviously there are different people in different parliaments, get auto fulfilled if you promise them basically this blank check. You go, all right, give me 20% levies now, and then whatever is the first thing you request, even if it's a law change, I'll fulfill. If you really want to make it a painful thing to press, that's something you can do. But at the moment, there's no way to react to a war declaration by asking for 20% levy size from your parliament, and this is why I'm not categorizing it as such. The other problem in EU5, of course, is that features that can be used as an immediate consequence action, such as hiring mercenaries, are, well, they're functional. Hiring mercenaries work. It's just something you don't want to do because it's so terrible. In EU4, hiring 4K mercenaries as a free company, and then hiring grand companies, and also bear in mind these mercenary companies scale with your size, so as you get a bigger nation, you get larger amounts of troops in your free companies and your grand companies. What if I want to hire mercenaries in EU5? Well, let's say again, Castile's declared, so I want to hire this guy, sure. He's a pretty good general. Maybe let's hire a slightly less expensive good general, right? Just for the point of comparison. How many troops can I get here? I mean, there's a little bit of micro. Let's round this up to 436 for the example. The contract list doesn't matter for the hiring cost. I can spend, for all intents and purposes, my life savings on 6 regiments. If we drop the armored horsemen and horsemen just to really squeeze out max troop count numbers, right? So really squeeze out troop count numbers. My maximum amount of life savings troops is 700 men. This is irrelevant. I understand they are mercenaries, so they're better than levies, but in the context of 55,000 versus 20,000, or dare I say, in the context of troop counts that matter, less than 1,000 men are a rounding error. And I do mean it, because at the moment I've been referring to the Castilian troops as 55k and my troops as 20k. The rounding error between what I've called here, the 600 on my end that I've rounded up, and the 377 from the Castilian I've rounded down, is literally the life savings amount of mercenaries that I can hire as a reaction. It is just never worth to hire them, and this is a balancing issue. Sure, we can hope it's eventually resolved, but for all intents and purposes, when you're playing the game on the ground at the moment, what this actually means is that mechanic of hiring mercenaries as a reaction may as well not exist. And one of the main reasons that this is a problem, and this is my first main gripe, dare I say, is that I think this creates a large feeling of helplessness when you're trying to play the game. Because if you're playing a Portugal game and Castile declares war on you and you haven't prepared for that by getting 50 alliances or overbuilding armories or basically becoming super friends with Castile, you're just dead. If you are playing a game as Holland because you've decided to install EU5, it's your first grand strategy game, God forbid, and then you decide to follow the tutorial and tutorial told you to go play Holland, and you're playing Holland, you maybe even conquered a couple countries around you, right? You feel like you're doing great, you build some buildings, then you zoom out. France has conquered half of Germany, and then they declare war on you. What are you meant to do? Like, what are you actually meant to do in that situation? The answer is you've lost this by not hyper-aggressively expanding into Germany yourself previously. That was the mistake you made 50 years ago, and that's the reason you're dead now as Holland. But that's not something we should be expecting from players. And if you do want to do a last stand glorious fight, you're literally better off declaring an offensive war in the last stand, because at least you can use a parliament 20% levy size preemptively because you're planning it. And this is kind of evident in every single campaign you play, even if you are not an underdog, even if you're playing a nation like France and you're getting invaded by England, or you're getting invaded by Bohemia, or whatever's going on, right? And you decide that now I'm going to pull out all the stops and go death war. You really can't in this game. There are roach things you can do in multiplayer, for lack of a better word. So to be clear, you can spam down markets and then not buy food in those specific markets. If I put down like 50 markets on my border with England, and then I don't buy food in any of those markets, what's going to happen is I'm going to start starving my pops over here. But that means that invading armies are going to very quickly run out of food, and it makes it a royal pain in the arse to actually invade. So there are some MP tactics you can start employing, in essence, both nationing yourself, but also nationing anyone trying to invade you. Sure, all of those things exist, but like, on a more conventional, dare I say, intended death war mechanic, what are you meant to do? Not to say it's easy in EU4, let's be absolutely clear. There's a reason playing an underdog nation is not trivial, dare I say. But if you are doing an Ireland campaign, you've united half of Ireland, you've played as one of the little Irish dudes, you're trying to unite the whole thing, and you start getting invaded by England, there's no real stops you can pull to do a glorious last stand, and that is an issue. It, in my opinion, takes away a lot of the player agencies. You're just kind of meant to sit there and die. And I understand it's historically accurate, because sitting there and dying, with all due respect, is kind of what the Irish did after England got kicked out of France, right? And not much they could do, they were hopelessly outmatched. But this is a video game, and simply put, that's not fun. The issue, though, and I think this is a more important thing on a more meta level approach to EU5, is that this goes beyond death wars and reacting to death wars and just in immediate reactions. Because most things in EU5, and I do mean genuinely most things and most decisions you make, have a payoff, if not in hundreds of years, but noticeable in the 300, 400 year marks for you to actually make a decision and then see the full ramifications of your decision. Let's now give a bit more of an over the top example. You are playing the game. Let's say we're playing as Portugal again, and we've decided we are going to go down innovative instead of traditionalist. Why we decide to do that? Well, there may be a couple reasons. Maybe we really like the institution embracement cost. Maybe we really want a lot of culture influence. But no, the reason we've decided in this campaign to push innovative is we want this plus 10% max literacy. Now, why do we want that plus 10% max literacy? Well, literacy does some other things on a local population. If we take a look at, for example, our demography over here, and we take a look at these laborers. Is it in here? Yeah, it's in here. These laborers have 10% literacy, which has given us production efficiency and maximum RGO size. So if we get another 10% max literacy, we'll get another 0.5% production efficiency and another 1% max RGO size. Is it an insane bonus? No, but over the course of a nation, over the course of different, shall we say, social groups giving different things, actually, peasant literacy is great because it really increases their promotion speed. As you can see, these Catholic peasants are promoting 20% faster from just 10% literacy, so 10% literacy translates to 20% promotion speed. That's just a nice bonus to have. You get the picture, there's more stuff, but also, in my opinion, one of the bigger things with literacy is it gives you 10% research speed effective, because your national increase in average literacy of 10% will correlate to 10% more research speed. And let's just say that this 10% monthly research speed from literacy is the reason you've decided to go 100% innovative, because you want 10% more research speed. What does 10% more research speed mean in practice? Well, sure, it means that if you are trying to speedrun a certain technology, you're able to get a couple months off it. If you're trying to speedrun a technology that's like 4 steps in, so for example, in the Age of Renaissance, you really want to get armories because you don't want to be invaded by Cassio and have manpower ready. Where are armories? Here they are, a bit late, but 4 techs in to get to armories. So what that means is that, okay, over the course of these techs, you can save, say, 8 months if you have 2 months off on each technology from 10% research speed. That's nice. But overall, the main impact is that by the time you're in the Age of Absolutism or Age of Revolutions, those months are going to add up, and you would have had, let's round up, let's say 30, maybe even 50 more technologies that you would not have had you not gone down innovativeness. And that's nice. Now, of course, compared to other nations that have not done that, well, it's not like you'll have any extra crucial technologies. Technologies that are big and important, like possible government reforms over here and separation of powers, even come late game. Or, industrialization for a flat 10% production efficiency. What a powerful technology is just right there, to be honest. All of these techs are going to be grabbed. So you're not grabbing super crucial stuff like 10% production efficiency. Your actual marginal technologies are going to be things like campaign logistics planning for 10% supply limit or 10% more food production. Or you pick up an extra 10% fort limit. Is that a bad modifier? Absolutely not. But it's not that transformative. And my point is that your decision, 300 in-game years away in the Age of Traditions, to go down innovativeness is translated by the end of the campaign, 300 years later, in, shall we say, to be honest, 30 to 50 more percentage modifiers like 10% fort limit or 10% food production. Does it matter? Sure. But it's a very, very late payoff. And we need to remember that if you don't get to the Age of Revolutions, for all intents and purposes, going 100 innovativeness versus 100% traditionalist in terms of your tech speed didn't really do anything. And let's be just upfront here. Every single campaign is not getting to 1837. Most of them, in fact, wager the vast majority of campaigns are not getting to 1837. So you have a lot of decisions which are important, but are only paid off after 300 years of playing. And my problem, dare I say, is that actually far too many decisions have such ridiculously long payoff timelines. But simply, why is prosperity important? Well, at high levels of prosperity, you gain passive dev gain. Very slow passive dev gain, but over the course of, you guessed it, 300 years, it adds up. And development is good. None of these modifiers win you the game individually. Lord knows market attraction isn't the reason you're getting development, right? But overall, if your nation is, let's say, consistently 20 development ahead, it's nice. You have some nice bonuses from that. Let me find a 20 development province so I can actually show you what my 20 development example is. There we go, here's one. So if you have this on every single one of your provinces compared to your opponents, because you've focused on a lot more prosperity, not only getting the prosperity bonuses, but also getting higher development, you're getting 20 more building levels everywhere. You're getting 2 more RGO size. You're getting 2% discount on all your buildings globally. That's not nothing. You get 4% local proximity cost. You get some more population capacity. You know, you get a little bit more market attraction. Your characters live 2 years longer. It's some nice bonuses. You're going to see them if you've optimized for prosperity 300 years later into the game. But if you haven't played 300 years, prosperity for all intents and purposes and development kind of feel like a pointless modifier that does nothing. Especially if you decide to go down free subjects for the monthly prosperity bonus, right? Let's decide that's the decision you've taken. The payoff on this decision is so far into the future, in many cases, I feel like you're really not going to be seeing it, and that's going to add to this feeling of helplessness, like a game where what you do doesn't truly matter, right? And needless to say, I don't think it's a good thing. But we've also been simplifying a feature because we need to be a bit more honest here. There isn't a lever in the game, there isn't a button you can press unless you open the console that just pushes you to 100% free subject or 100% innovativeness overnight. No, getting to 100% innovativeness and getting to 100% free subjects is in its own right a process. You do this by passing laws or passing estate privileges or reforming your society in a way that gives you progress towards each one of these sliders, right, towards innovativeness. You go to your religious laws and you do no censorship. You go to your court customs and you do a court of culture for even more progress to innovativeness, right? These are all individual decisions you're making, and these big decisions giving you 0.1 monthly progress, you need to make 10 of them and make a very conscious effort to actually get towards 100% innovativeness. And of course, I am exaggerating here. You could technically only push 0.5 innovativeness and get some events to get to the last 100. Either way, you're still making at least 10 decisions to push towards this 100% instance. You're doing 10 actions, you're doing 10 things. For something that is reflected in your country by increasing your max literacy cap, which then needs to tick up, by the way. This max literacy doesn't apply immediately. Your pops then need to gain this literacy. For you to then gain the research speed, which is reflected in 300 years with some extra technologies. I do apologize for rambling here, but I hope you understand just there is a place for long-term planning, but this entire game, in many ways, boils down to, in my opinion, far too much long-term planning and very few things you can do immediately as a reaction to problems to solve them. If I had to give a summary of comparing playing a nation in EU4 versus EU5, in EU4 I feel like I could really shove a nation around in specific directions I wanted, and if I wanted to death war and basically nation ruin myself, or if I really wanted to focus on prosperity and dev myself to the moon and all these other things, yeah, it wasn't easy, but there were tools I had at my disposal to do so. In EU5, I feel like there's a lot less of that. Instead of big shoves, I'm doing very minute small adjustments that add up to significant big movements, but I'm also lacking these tools I have for, dare I say, just achieving what I want pretty instantly. But let's zoom out a bit. Quite literally in the game now, we've zoomed out a bit. Is the presence of mechanics where you have to make a bunch of decisions, a bunch of small decisions that add up to have a big consequence at the end, like 50 more technologies, or even in the case of prosperity, consistently higher developed nation than your peers around you, right? Are those bad things? I'd argue no. I think that's good. I think there's a place for long-term planning in the game. My main criticism, and I think this is, I want to say the main takeaway I want from this video, is not that these systems are inherently bad. I just wish there were more systems that had more immediate effects that I could use as almost reactions to other things happening. These systems of values and their long-term effects on, for example, free subjects giving you monthly prosperity and prosperity being important is a good thing to have in the game. It's good to have these long-term policies and seeing the long-term impact of your actions come to fruition. That's good. I just want more things that have more immediate consequences because at the moment, in my opinion, there's a lack of those in the game. But yeah, that's about it. With all that said though, that is all the time I have for you today. Thank you very much for watching, and a special thank you to all my channel members, especially Ark, Solus, Lemon, Zendikar, Nick Hasnan, Hatan, Star72, the awesome Rapid Best of Gaming, Gramo, Flavia, Leberule, WH Sob, Anthony 35, AC Napo, Conspiracy Pizza, Yukata, Dan Ray, Marvi, Jack, Ryland, Stuart Allen, Andrew Black, Nebula, Zentronic, Twinit, and Aquabird.